All right. Very good evening, folks. This is Paul, NO0T at the Front Range 6 Meter Group. And tonight we have the honor of hearing from Lance, W7GJ, on his DXpedition to 3B9GJ. So without any further ado, go ahead, Lance, and take over if you can.
Thanks very much, Paul, and good evening to everybody. This is a pretty short presentation. Let me just see if I can share my screen and find the shows and get things going here. I think I have to minimize this for just a minute. Now I don't know where everybody else is. Let's see here.
Coming up, Lance.
Can anybody see my
Yes.
screen right now?
We got
Gotcha.
it.
Okay.
Yes.
Here we go. Ready or not?
Can you take it full screen?
He will here in
Yep.
a second. He just goes to slideshow, I guess.
Okay.
Looking
The 3B9GJ operation was my 18th 6-meter EME DXpedition. And this was the first one with this Q65 pileup feature that's in Q65 mode in the new WSJTX. And that's where you just exchange grid squares. But it's a little faster just because of that. However, where it really shines, and I've done a Q65 show on here before, so I won't duplicate that. But where it really shines is it opens up the whole bandwidth with full sensitivity to decode any of the callers once they've been decoded once before. So basically, it's like it makes a call3.txt file. If you're familiar with JT65, it basically makes one of those for each day. But the way it makes it is it has to decode the calls once, and then it's that their frequency and their call sign and their grid are in the file. So it really makes it very, very easy to decode those stations. Again, you don't have to be on their frequency to decode them. If you are on their frequency, it decodes them, I think, 1 dB better. But it's a really, really helpful when you have a number of stations who are calling, because I'll show you some examples later on. I can receive multiple Rogers from multiple people all at once. And in a situation when you're on the other side of the world and the moon is all coming up for people at the same time across the North America, for example, it's an experience of calling CQ endlessly with no response, followed by complete bedlam. And that's one of the reasons why I was looking forward to using this feature. So this was a picture that my wife took when she was out on a snorkeling expedition. And that's where we were. The first week, it was too stormy for her to go out on the water at all, because there was an anti-cyclone stuck just south of the island, and the winds were very, very high, and the seas were basically closed to any any kind of boat traffic at all. So after a couple nights layover in Paris on the way, to break up the trip, we wound up on Sunday morning, August 27th, at the airport in Rodrigues and 3B9. And this was all the gear that we had. So I'm always celebratory when I can see that all the equipment has arrived. Of course, we don't know if it's going to work, but hopefully with the good packing, it would be okay. And it turned out to be all fine. So later that afternoon, Sunday afternoon, I had the mast up, and it took me quite a while. You can see it's kind of a tight area. It's difficult for you to tell, but this ground around this little rock wall in this small yard drops off rapidly in all directions, and there are thorn bushes, so you can't walk back in there. So I was forced, it took me quite a long time to find a spot where I could put the antenna, and also where I could raise it safely and then bring it up. And I was going to be limited here by this structure of part of the building where we were staying. I couldn't elevate fully when the antenna was pointed due north, but as it turned out, I thought, well, that's not going to probably be a problem, because North America can't see me when I'm fully elevated anyway. And nobody in Europe is going to be interested in 3B9 because they've already all worked 3B9 FR. And as it turned out, I had other problems like weather that would be prevented me from elevating fully anyhow. So it was a good spot to try to stick the antenna, and it was close enough to the operating position that I only needed 50 feet of coax. So these are just a couple details of, there's the mast on the prop ready to be raised. And you can see here, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but this bush here, these things here are grass, that's okay. But this bush pile of bushes here were all cleared when the house was constructed, and there's all thrown there. And it's like a barbed wire fence. I mean, these bushes were apparently imported by the British when the British had control of the island for 100 years back in the day. They brought these bushes over from Africa. I'm not sure why they did it. They are a favorite. They're a favorite treat for giraffes, but there are no giraffes living in Rodrigues, and there have never been any giraffes here. The only thing that they use them for on the island right now is for fences to keep cattle in, because they're like natural barbed wire fences. So this is assembling the Yagi on there was a nice flat terrace kind of thing that it was the roof of an underground room that was under construction where we stayed, and it was a great place to assemble the Yagi, stretch it all out. It's 43 feet long, so you need to have some place fairly large just to assemble it. And this was a detail of how I mounted the driven element. I wound up having to make some last minute insulated mounts for the driven element and the first director, because I had misdrilled some holes slightly off center when the whole boom was drilled for the elements. So in order to get them lined up, I had these high density polyethylene blocks, and I just drilled a 1-inch hole in them, and then I screwed some small, I think it was 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch angle aluminum tabs into the blocks, and then I used little stainless steel hose clamps to position the driven element where it needed to be and the first director where it needed to be. And this system really held everything perfectly. And this is my 1-to-1 bell and my RF, basically an RF choke that was attached to the driven element. And you can see my high-tech way of holding the ballon down to the boom here, where it just goes over top of the little slot that I filed into the D1 element, and then I held it on with Ziploc ties. And this was the method that was used on all the other elements, and this was the design from KJ9I for mounting the insulated elements to the boom. And the little screw that goes through the boom and the element is actually insulated where it goes through the element. So the top of the screw is conducting to the boom, but it's not to the elements. So all the elements are insulated. This was a 9-element YU7EF design that I decided to try here on this trip, because I wanted to make sure that I had enough bandwidth to, well, number one, to be able to go up to 313 if I was to work some TEP, or if it rained, I didn't want to have to worry about my tight bandwidth on the 6M8GJ. So there it is. By Monday afternoon, everything was ready to go. However, it was so windy, and you can't really tell that from this slide, but the whole first week was extraordinarily windy, and at times I could barely stand up. And so, I know that I could get the fellow that owned the Airbnb to come help me carry the antenna over and put it on the mast. But I just envisioned this thing when I stood up on blocks to put it on the mast. I just envisioned this sail just taking off, and I didn't want to jeopardize the whole trip by having the antenna be totally destroyed. So we put it off until the next morning, when at least theoretically, right after dawn, you would think that it would be a little bit calmer. It was slightly calmer, but he did bring lots of helpers over. We had more people than we had room for to help us put the antenna on there. So at least the antenna wasn't going to go flying off down the hillside toward the ocean. So here you can see I can't really run the video from here. It has started already, but maybe you can see that there are lots of people helping get the antenna over to the mast, and so I can stand up on a block and actually slip it onto the end of the mast. Is that coming through at all, or?
Yeah, it's about a frame, 2 frames a second, but it's watchable. That's
Let's so I had the antenna up, and I was ready in time for moonrise on Tuesday, August 29th. And moonrise started out being out over this to the right over this little peninsula area, but toward the end of the trip, when we started getting a common window with Montana and California and Washington, it was out over the ocean, which was really great. And most of the moonsets were out over the ocean, although they were aimed out over the biggest city on the island too, the capital of Port Maturin. And it was a little noisier when I was pointed that direction. And it was noisier most of the time during the nighttime. And I don't know if it was LED lights, night lights that people had on, or street lights that were on, but a lot of the noise went down when the sun came up. But the noise level was quite high for me most of the time when I was on the moon at night. Let me see if I can advance this. Here we go. So before I fired it up, I just hooked up my Nano VNA just to make sure that that the SWR and everything was okay. And this is what it showed. Basically, the SWR was like 1.03, 1.05, 1.07. So I decided, well, I guess I can fire up the amp into it. And this was when it was aimed on the horizon and right next to the building. Not an ideal situation. I mean, the best way to test it, like I did here before I left home, is to point it up at 45 degrees and not have any obstructions around it. So, you know, this was the close-up of the SWR plot. So I figured this will be nice and safe, even if it rains hard. It shouldn't affect my bandwidth at all. So I have on my website a photograph of the antenna and the plots that I did for it last spring when I built the antenna. Basically, I used the 6M8GJ boom, and all but a couple inches were used by the 9-element design that Pop did for me to come up with an antenna that was within a couple tenths of a dB with the same amount of forward gain as a 6M8GJ, but with a lot greater bandwidth. So on the next day, the blue moon was rising at the end of August, and there's a picture of it. I was ready for it and worked people on it. This is an example of the problems that I was faced with for the first week. I mean, there were some times when I could not untie, and I had to stay on my moonrise or moonset. If you look closely, and I don't know how well this video is coming across to you, but you can see that the top section of mast is actually bending. And I was having a real hard time holding the antenna, trying to take pressure off of the antenna. You can see there's lots of slack in the guy lines as it wobbles back and forth. And I actually had my steering lines, which are the two are attached here at the rear where the guy lines attach for the boom. And the same thing up front, I have a pair of steering lines, which are small diameter nylon cord, which is attached to the screw eyes where the guy ropes or guy lines are attached for the boom. I had these out almost horizontally and attached to the house concrete pillars to basically try to pull the antenna against the wind to hold it. And that it was still wobbling around like that. It was pretty scary wind. Now here's something that I needed to deal with in the planning process. It's the common moon problem. When you go to the opposite end of the Earth, there are very limited windows between the two stations, and so you have to have a good horizon for both people. And so I spent a lot of time trying to find a location on Rodrigues where I would be able to have a horizon out over the water, at least some of the time, so that I could work the people on the opposite side of the Earth, which turns out is pretty close to eastern Montana. And then, of course, as I explained before, I was expecting many colors as the moon rises across North America, and they were all getting moonrise at the same time. So that resulted in lots of unanswered CQs and lots of bedlam when the moon finally came up. And this was the view of the horizon from the site that I chose. You can see that mostly from the east to the north on moonrise, and even from a little from the south of west on moonset, it was out over the water by, I was 120 to or so feet at least, maybe 200 feet above the ocean. That's another view of the negative horizon from hey, what's that? This is my final moonrise on September 6th, and I just show you. I'll do a close up here, but it was amazing to have moonrise out over the water while it was also moonset in North America, and it was also moonset for Northern Europe. So you can see I've got European stations in here. I've got WA5VGI, which was operating at W6UC's location in Southern California, even copying K7CW up in Washington. And the signals are pretty good, -11, -17, -15. They're the best signals that I copied. And certainly all the stations were just wonderful, wonderful to have. And you can see that there was no problem copying them because even the weaker ones, K7CW had already been decoded once, so he was in what they call the active stations list. So it immediately knew who he was on that frequency. And OG2M, for example, here it's -32, but it decoded fine. So it was very, very helpful. This was at that that last moonrise. This was the FOF2 map from Australia, showing their prediction for what the ionization looked like at that time. And I'm over here. So look at that. I mean, I had really a clear shot to the northeast. I mean, it was wonderful. But already, I was having, by the time this area here moves over here, so was the moon. And I was pointing on my moon set into this stuff, and it really made it tough. Lots of QSB, very erratic signals. You know, it's one of the issues about trying to work EME from the TEP zone is you have these huge areas of ionization that come across you every day, and your best time to do anything is to work on your moonrise when it's like this, and then when it moves over and gives you a clear spot to the west, that's when the best time is to work for your moon set, and they don't happen the same day. So anyway, I try to arrange these DXpeditions to give me 9 or 10 moon passes, and that's one of the reasons why, is so that if there are auroral disturbances, or there are these TEP ionization blockage issues, or I've got some other weather problems, hopefully 9 or 10 moon passes, I can work most of the serious people who are out to make contact with me. So this is just a quick summary of Q65 pileup. It was developed to quickly work multiple Q65 callers. And everybody who's decoded is added to the active stations list. And those are decoded with maximum sensitivity. It's not necessary to have those call signs in your DX call box on WSJTX, because it already knows that they're in the list. So that's a very handy feature. And several times I received our final Rogers at once from different stations on different frequencies, because they had been in that active stations lists, which is really a handy feature. Here's an example of how the little active stations list window looks, and it keeps track of them by age too, to let you know that, okay, after it gets to be in there for 24 hours, then it wipes them all out and you have to start again. And one of the nice things that Joe put in there is he put in their elevation. And I said, take them out of the window when their elevation goes below -5 degrees. So then they're gone, so that we don't have them cluttering up the list of people that are potentials to call. So here are finally the results. I wound up with 76 6-meter EME contacts, 19 TEP contacts. I didn't spend a lot of time on TEP, but I did look for it a couple times before I started my moonrise. I made 2 direct FT8 contacts. One was with a Romanian freighter or something. It was north of, like just one grid square north of where I was, and the other one was with Robert at 3B9FR, who couldn't believe how loud I was and that I could work him when he was running 1 watt. And I explained to him that we were line of sight 2 miles apart, and he might as well have been in my shack. So and one direct Q65 pileup that was also with Robert. And so here are the stations that I worked. Most of them were in North America. I did work a few in Europe. There actually were a couple, I think, that still needed 3B9. And then there were some stations like OH2BC who waited till the very last minute. And when it looked like I was finished making any contacts at all, he called me just to make a contact. So he didn't need it either. But it was especially nice to be able to work so many stations in North America who still needed it. And that was a station set up in 3B9. This is my little portable amplifier from the DX shop in the UK. It didn't have a whole lot of room, but I try to keep the amplifier as low as possible so that it can be cooler. There was no air conditioning or anything, but there was a good breeze that came through there all the time, as you can guess. So it kept everything cool, but I still wanted it as low as possible. So I just put it on a suitcase. And then my power supply that I ran at 57 volts is right next to it. And then my preamplifier is here. I have a little watt meter, bird watt meter element directly stuck on the back of the amplifier. And then, you know, it was not a really tidy arrangement, but here's my little 50 megahertz bandpass filter, my AirSpy R2 receiver. And this is the little box that I made for switching things on and off. So these are just the yellow RCA plugs are just PTT lines coming out of there. One to turn off my preamp on transmit, and the other is to key the transmitter on transmit. And what I used for a rig for the transmitter was my ELAD FDM Duo, which was running a little under 3 watts output. And I made a special little aluminum box to hold a watt meter, because this was lighter weight for shipping and more compact than a regular Bird 43 situation. So that was the station. More details about all the equipment and the antennas and so on is on my website under equipment. And so people have asked me where I'm going to go next. And as you know, I've been trying for a couple of years to get to ZD9. And I was told last January that they were sure that there were no spaces available for me on the ship from Cape Town. So they had to give them all to other people who were going over there on business. So 3B9 was my backup. So that's why we went to 3B9. I'm still hopeful that I'll be able to get over to ZD9 in next August. And they're sending me my license right now. So, but I won't know for sure that I have a berth until probably May or June. So it's I'm on the waiting list. As long as there's no other visitors, I'll be in good shape. I'm on a different ship this time too. I'm on the same ship that YL7 or ZD9W went on, which is the MV Lance. So they take I think up to 6 passengers. It's a freighter fishing ship that goes over there. So once a month or once every couple months. So I've got my fingers crossed on that one. Another kind of option that's in the bucket list is Central French Polynesia. some of us have worked FO4BM, but his antenna is no longer functional and he can't get it working. And it's his QTH is really difficult too, because he doesn't get moonrise until about 23 degrees elevation because of the steep mountains. So I know a lot of people in Europe still need central Polynesia. I have activated the Marquesas and the Austral Islands in French Polynesia a couple of years ago. So the central French Polynesia is still, I think, needed by a lot of people. So we'll see. I mean, that may be a possibility. And I'm kind of intrigued with Socotra Island off the coast of Yemen. There are people there right now, but they're only doing HF. And that's a really tough one to get to and a tough one to operate from. But it's needed by almost everybody around the world on 6 meters. So that's one of the important factors for being in the bucket list. H44 is still needed by a lot of people around the world too, except for people in Japan and Australia. So I've been looking at spots to set up over there. And I still have my eye on a spot to set up in T2 in Tuvalu. And I just, it's very hard to communicate with the people over there. The communications are not great. I would love to activate that one before it goes totally underwater. Of course, it's going to be a problem because every month during high tide, the seas just wash over the place, and I'm sure it's going to be tough to hold the guy anchors and so on when that happens. But it would be a nice one to get over there and activate. So I wonder if anybody has any questions. I will make up some answers.
Lance, sorry, go ahead.
So did you have any issues with the Q65 pileup mode?
Initially, I did have some problems. I couldn't get it to open up the logging window. However, and I don't know, when I tested it for the first time last spring, it worked fine. And then when I got down there, I couldn't get it to work. However, Uwe, who is the programmer for W7GJ improved, he fixed that in his version, and I was able to download an updated copy of that after the first day, and from then on it worked fine. So he's been great on putting in all the updates all along and putting in new features into the software, and many of those features are going to be in the normal W7GJ the next time it gets released with an update. But those updates come out much less frequently than Uwe's, which come out immediately. So anyway, after that was fixed, there were no problems with the software.
Lance, a side comment. There's a number of us that have been using the Uwe's improved version, and good results with it. No problems at all, and lots of cool things that it has in it. So anybody that feels like they want to try it, don't hesitate.
Yeah, that's the version that I use here too at home. So it does have some pretty nice features in it.
Lance,
This
I
was
have
in downtown Port Mature, and this was right in downtown Capitol, by the English, what they call the English Beach. So I thought that was pretty cute. So I decided I'd put that in. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Lance, when you have a station that has not yet been decoded, did it help for you to enter their call sign and their grid into the DX call box and then double click on their trace? I just wondered from the standpoint of the DX station how the software works.
Yeah, that's what I had to do if I knew that there was somebody on a certain frequency, or I thought that they were near a certain frequency and I saw the trace and they hadn't decoded them. I'd kind of guess who it might be and double click on them after I entered their call sign in the DX call box. Before Q65 pileup, I had to do that for everybody who was calling. And it was a real problem. You know, when I was in Mayotte the year before, it was the exact darn situation. You know, I was on the opposite side of the world, and I had all of a sudden all the callers across the United States. There'd be this line, and everybody would be calling at once. And how am I supposed to know where their offsets are and enter their call signs in and try them, and no, that didn't work, and then that's my transmit period again already? You know, it's just, there's not enough time to experiment with that manually. So Joe was very responsive that way, and the Q65 pileup really helped from the standpoint of the DX station. From the caller's standpoint, I mean, it's just transparent. You know who I am, and you know where I am and where my frequency is, and so you just keep calling. But for me, I mean, the stations are coming and going faster than I can sort them out. So I mean, it's really handy to have that feature.
Well, I would just like to say how amazing you are and what an incredible job you do. And I think we're all reminded of how hard EME is when there have been a couple of recent DXpeditions where they found it very difficult to make contacts. And I want to compliment you on what an incredible operator you are. And I never cease to be amazed and impressed.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, you know, there is a lot of stuff to do and to think about and to plan for, and a lot of on-site stuff that you have to go through. And I know that it's hard to anticipate a lot of the stuff if you haven't done it before. But after 18 tries, and setting this stuff up more than that, I've encountered most of the problems, but you never know what's going to happen. I mean, that's, as K7BV used to say, the adventure of a DXpedition is the adventure part, and it's the unknown that you're going into. And you know, I never know what's going to be around the corner when I go off to these places. And for example, in Mayotte, I didn't know that I was going to have a baobab tree blocking my moonset in my best days of the month. Here, I didn't know that I was going to be relegated mostly to tie down on the horizon for my moonrise for basically the first week because of these high winds, and I couldn't elevate very high, and I could elevate a little bit on toward moonset because the wind was blowing with the antenna, but it was still I couldn't go straight up in the air with the antenna or just break it off. So you just never know exactly what you're going to run into. I felt bad that I couldn't be on the air more of this last DXpedition. And there were stations that I missed working that I would have really liked to have contacted, but between the weather and these high areas of ionization that you always run into in the TEP zone when you're on the horizon, there's just, it just was not it was not ideal to contact all the people that I wanted to. I usually like to get over 100 stations in the log on EME to call it a success. But I think that this 76 was probably okay because, like I said before, most of Europe didn't need it at all. The guys in ZS, I worked both the guys in ZS, they still needed it. So I was happy to get them in the log, but most of the other people from Region 1 had already worked it.
Lance, what do you have to do any more noise mitigation when you arrive on these sites? Is there anything beyond the ferrites that you do when you arrive?
When I was in Mayotte, I made sure that all the LED lights in the house were turned off when I was running. And I did that this time too. We made sure that, and all the lights in the house were LEDs. And so I had to make sure that they were all off. But that's all I could do. If I had ignition noise or a generator or something like that, I can noise blank that out with SDR console easily. But I can't noise blank out an island worth of LED noise. I haven't figured out a way to do that. And if anybody could, I mean, that would be just really handy. It would have been really handy this trip. Like I say, I try to locate myself someplace away from all of that built up area to avoid those kinds of problems. But this time I didn't have that option because I had to be someplace on the north end of the northeastern tip of the island to have overwater moonrise and overwater moonset, to have a window with all parts of the United States. And so I guess I don't know if there was a quieter part of the island where I could have operated. Maybe in the far western side by the airport would have been quieter, but then I wouldn't have had any moonrise at all. So I think the best solution for noise abatement is to try to avoid it all, but it's getting harder and harder with everybody switching to LED and starting with solar panels and things like that. But it was an interesting island, and I'm glad we had a chance to activate it. And I'm glad that people turned out to call me. So I really appreciate all the effort of people coming in the middle of the night and giving me a call. I'm up in the middle of the night, and I greatly appreciate how hard it is to stay awake in the middle of the night. So I'm really thrilled when I see people calling.
Thank you, Lance. We appreciate the new one and everything you go through to get it there.
Well, thank you. You're welcome, and I hope that we can give you a new one next year.
Lance, how do you calculate the elevation of your antenna? Is it a mechanical thing, or have you got a transducer to give you angle? If it's a cloudy night?
I just use a handheld inclinometer. I tried experimenting with I bought a little thing off the internet to mount on the antenna, and it said that it used Wi-Fi and all that stuff. And it turned out that it uses Wi-Fi over a distance of about 6 feet, which really didn't help me. So I've just been sticking with the visual inclinometer. I do have a problem between when I put it on the horizon around 15 degrees or 17 degrees and elevating it up to about 30 degrees. The modeling of the lobe is very erratic and basically unknown because of the terrain and the height. It is above the ground. The ground has a big effect, and the local terrain and hills have a big effect. And the bottom line is that the antenna's lobe is not pointing where the antenna is pointing. So I don't look forward to operating between the horizon and 30 degrees because, the stronger stations often will come through, but it's usually really frustrating for an hour or two until, above 30 degrees, the lobe pretty well follows where the antenna is aimed. And then after that, I'm okay up to as high as I can go, which has been, if there's no wind, it has been about 65 degrees. But I think on this next trip, if it's ZD9, I'm already looking at using a shorter top section mast so that the antenna will be very close to the guy ropes. And so I won't be able to elevate probably more than 50 degrees, or the lower elements will get caught up in the guy ropes or arc over to them and burn them through, just like they did my hand once when I grabbed the antenna to move it one time. Very long time ago, I learned quickly on that one. You don't, but in the middle of the night, you think, oh, well, let's just move it over just a tad. And, the reflector on the tip of the reflector, or in the driven element, that's the high voltage point. And it really wakes you up in a hurry. So you don't want to have those hitting the guy ropes, especially not if they're wet with salt air or salt spray or salt water, because I've got places in my guy ropes that look like somebody's been trying to burn them through. And the last thing in the world you want is to have that happen and then the antenna blow away. So, but I was following ZD9W, and he couldn't keep his wire antennas in the air without them breaking and blowing over. So I was pretty I've been pretty well warned now about the high winds and the bad weather down in the roaring 40s. And ZD9 is pretty prone to that kind of weather. I mean, there are no trees down there. There are reasons for that. And there's also nothing to stop the prevailing wind from the northwest, except, land in Brazil, 2,000 miles away. So it's pretty scary. So I'm going to have to try to limit my mast height, I think, down there. And also I may have to try to keep it tied to the northwest a lot of the time, which for terrestrial work would be okay, because that would be pointed toward USA. And I might lock out and get some propagation on terrestrially, even if I can't elevate during a bad storm or something. But I'll be there long enough also, for 5 or 6 weeks, so that hopefully I'll have ample opportunity to hit some good EME days under some good weather conditions as well. At least that's the plan at this point.
Well, let's hope it works out for you there, Lance, and I really appreciate everything you did. And I'm sorry we didn't get to work, but we got close, which for me was amazing. I never thought I really didn't think I was ever going to hear you, but it actually worked. So I actually heard you and you heard me, but that was okay. I mean, that's enough for me right now. Maybe next year I'll be luckier.
Well, and each one of these trips is like there's some people who it's their first EME, at least reception. And in some cases, almost every trip is a first EME contact for somebody, which is, at least it spreads the word and it builds activity, which is one of the goals of these expeditions. So anyway, thanks very much for having me on here, Paul, and let me know if you can line up Scott McIntosh anytime soon. So
yeah, I think I'm going to give him a call this week and tell him he has to give us a update in December. And are we at the peak, or are we falling down the other side?
And is there going to be a double peak or a single peak?
I know, one hump or two, right?
We hope that it's one hump.
All right, bud. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and we will be posting this on YouTube, and you guys will be able to see it over and over again as many times as you like. So thanks for everybody for joining tonight, and we'll see you next time. I'll let you know when Scott's going to be available.
Thanks again, Lance.
Sounds good, guys.
Good night.